Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I've never done it.
Coaches, welcome in to Essential Coaching Conversations in 2025. Kyle, we are back. And we are doing something a little bit different, like we told you in our last episode in 2024 of what we're going to do. And we were just having a quick laugh. I asked Kyle if he wanted to start the pod, and he's like, I've never done that before. So this is the intro to that. But Kyle, I'm throwing it to you. Let the people know what we are doing in 2025 that's a little bit different and a little more essential.
Yeah. We were talking over the break getting into 2025. I'm not a big New Year's resolution kind of guy, but I did get a little bit of a break and did a lot of reading, did a lot of thinking, and it's been really great for me personally and at work, and then talking with you about what we're doing with the pod. And, we really try to stick to our guns, as it were, as essential coaching and essential coaching conversations, and wanting to be as essential as possible and try to cut the fat a little bit. And I've enjoyed some of the little quirky intros that we've done. It's been fun, but everybody's getting busier and busier and busier. And so the thought was, can we stay disciplined and kind of jump right into the meat of a topic and give not like mini episodes, like little quick hits for 3 or 5 minutes, but really dive as deep as we can in 20-25 minutes so people can access this content, listen to it, quick drive to work, on the lawnmower, maybe stack a couple of episodes, maybe you're washing dishes, and just try to get some of this to people in a little bit more efficient manner. So we'll probably start each of these next few episodes kind of like this, letting you know what we're doing, and then eventually we'll become a little bit more efficient with it. But yeah, it was a pretty good laugh when I didn't know how to start the show. I can't brush my teeth with my left hand. I can't unload the dishwasher with my left hand, and I can't start the show. So you're gonna have to carry that every single time. So I'll throw it to you to kind of tee up the topic.
Yeah, no, I'll do my best to have the intro. I feel like that's my strong suit, is welcoming people to things, and then that's about it. That's the only value I add these days. So our topic today is something that was sent to us. I don't know if you got it individually. I'm sure you did, but it was sent to us in a group chat that we're in, and then I was sent it individually by a couple of people too. And this happened last week. So obviously a lot of things have happened in the last week, but this has been sticking a little bit for me. And it was this clip of Mick Cronin, the UCLA men's basketball head coach, talking about like his players being delusional and just going off on his players. And he's done this before, right? We saw this when he was at Cincinnati. We've seen it, while he's been at UCLA. And we're going to play the clip for you and then talk about it. But I want to preface it with, this was all over social media. The clip that we were sent was on a mainstream media network, right? Like CBS Sports posted this as like a clickbait engagement thing on Instagram. And I'm sure on Twitter and other places, but just the fact that this makes the round, and then even looking at some of the comments, we'll go through some of that stuff, but we'll play the clip for you here and then talk about it right afterwards.
We're soft. So don't tell me you want to win. I have to run on the court to get guys to play hard. It's crazy, and it's every day. I'm tired of it. It's every day. I have the most energy of anybody at practice every day. I'm upset with everybody in that locker room, my assistant coaches and my players. I don't need to do anything else. I almost got 500 wins. I'm only 53. You think I'm coaching the Lakers? I mean, it's a joke. What the truth of it is, Ben, it's really hard to coach people that are delusional. The hungry dog gets the bone. We got guys that think they're way better than they are. They're nice kids. They're completely delusional about who they are. And the team that's mind is on the right stuff and hungry to get a win in conference play is the team that's probably going to win.
Initial thoughts, Kyle.
First thing that stands out is old guy yelling at clouds. Get off my lawn. I think the question we have to ask, in fairness, is, when is the first time his players and staff have heard these sentiments? And if it's in this press conference, then I think we have a much bigger issue. Now, what we don't know and what we're not privy to is, has this been said behind closed doors in the past? Has it been talked about in practice? Has it been in team meetings? Has he kind of taken all these routes and feels exhausted at this point where this is the only thing left? And that's what we don't know. I would assume it's probably not the last resort, and obviously sometimes we get a little frustrated, and once we get going, it's kind of hard to stop. But when I was going back trying to look at this, I actually stumbled on a clip of Jay Billis talking about this, and Billis kind of took the words right out of my mouth in prepping for this episode. You're telling on yourself in your teaching. You're telling on yourself in your ability to connect and your ability to, get your point across, as it were. And I think this episode is a quintessential example of telling on ourselves. We're either not connecting, we're not teaching, or even if we feel we are doing those things, we are not controlling this emotional agility, the discipline, the character, the ability to control what comes out of our mouths. If any one of those three things is taking place, we're telling on ourselves. And again, we don't know what has led up to this, and maybe he's reached a boiling point. But the thing that was most telling to me, and this is what I kind of want to get your thoughts on, is the part where he talks about, I don't really have to do this. I've got 500 wins. I'm 53, which I would have thought the guy was 65. So maybe that's what D1 head coaching does to you, is it ages you pretty quickly. But him saying, I've got 500 wins, I don't need to be here. Maybe that's what your team is picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
You say you're the most passionate. You say you're the most this, you're the most that. Narcissists tend to think that they are the only ones doing anything, or they are doing something to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have a lot of blind spots in that instance. You are not as attuned to who you are and how you are coming across as you think you are. And if you're saying the quiet part out loud of, I don't really need to do this anymore, I've done what I need to do, how much of that is being picked up from his players and his staff? And how much of that is leading to these trust issues that is ultimately not reflecting their performance on the court?
So I think what you're talking about is self-awareness, right? How do our actions impact somebody else or impact other people? And I found it quite telling, to your point, that he's talking about how his assistant coaches aren't committed, or they're not the ones that are like driving the ship forward, and he's doing everything. Like, bro, you hired them. All right. Why did you hire them? Was it because they can recruit? Was it because they can get you kids that you can now throw under the bus in a post-game press conference, losing to the University of Michigan by 19 points? Right? You're not going to go put the ball in the basket for those guys. Not at 5'7" and 53 years old. That's not happening. And so the way to build that trust, the way to breed that trust, is not to hold yourself above them and say, I don't need to do this. You guys are wasting my time. I could be golfing. Okay, go golf then. Right? You coach at John Wooden's school at UCLA, where John Wooden wouldn't be caught dead doing this in a post-game press conference. You think he ever went in a post-game press conference and called out Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for not playing hard? Or Bill Walton for not playing hard? Even if he thought that, he would go out and say, it was my fault we lost. I'll take ownership of it. That breeds trust to your guys. Now, you can have this conversation privately. Don't get me wrong. You and I have both been in locker rooms and in film rooms where we've had that conversation privately, where we have called up our teams to say, hey, this is unacceptable, our level of effort. We've shown it on the film. We've addressed it. And then we go into practice and we are going to work on it. Right? Now, I do want to point our attention to the comments on this that we were reading ahead of time. And there are some really violent comments on this. And of course, right, social media comments are not a place where you're going to find a lot of positivity anyway. But there's a lot of like people who don't understand, right? So welcome to the world of paid college athlete who can transfer whenever he wants, the reality of coaching today's kids. there was one about like I would run them until they puke, and now it's just going to be film at 11. No, but R Collins 303, and Kyle, you can see this on the screen here. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? Is he referring to the coaching staff he hired and the players he recruited and signed? Why is he saying he has nothing left to prove? Because he's close to 500 wins. He's never won a title, never made it to a championship game, so on and so forth. Like, I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? And we know that the metrics are not necessarily just winning or just winning championships. We've talked about that a lot. You've won 2 championships. I've never won a championship. I would say we're both very successful coaches because of the impact we've had on people. And yours happened to culminate in winning championships. Mine happened to culminate in some really good years. But ultimately, like getting a message from one of my former players the other day that I coached 6 years ago, who's now coaching herself. I'm not sure Mick Cronin's getting those messages, Kyle. What do you think?
Yeah, and he might, and there might be one player in that locker room that does respond this way, and there might be a select group that still responds to this, and this might have worked better 30, 40, 50 years ago. But I think coaching has done a good job, and social media and the connected world has probably played a large part in this, where we get to share ideas and people have grown and evolved, and we're talking more about our why and leading more servant leadership and more transformational versus transactional. And you hear a lot of these kind of buzzword things and, culture and yada, yada. And it's better to have those things in our vocabulary and our conversations than it is to not have them. But I think what we are seeing is an even more rapid evolution, and we're not able to develop as fast as the changing landscape is around us. And then you factor in the transfer portal and players they're professionals now at this level, right? Like they're paid to perform, and it's not this same amateurism. I play for the love of the game, and maybe some kids do, and maybe some kids don't. Like for most of them, it might quite literally be the way to get out of the neighborhood, make some money, and be able to set themselves up. And so it's just a completely different dynamic and world that everyone is having to navigate. And I don't think we are quite equipped as a profession to evolve as fast as our players are needed or as our environment is changing. Like it's just happening too quick. And it's sure, as we get older, we get set in our ways. And I think it becomes even more important for some of this self-reflection. And you've got to be willing to change and adapt. I mean, we saw is it Jim Laranaga's done? I mean, we're seeing coaches that have been doing this for a while are just like F it. I don't want to do this anymore. And I applaud them because that shows self-awareness. Like, hey, I'm just not cut out for this anymore. It's time for the next generation or the changing of the guard or whatever. And it's not for you. It's not for you. And like, I stand up and clap for them because I think that's really great. And I'm assuming we are going to see more and more and more of this. But what we don't really see is the 30-year-old head coach phenom that's a head coach somewhere doing this. Mm-hmm. Where there's sort of this Mason-Dixon line, if you were, of like you reach a certain age, you're either grumpy and complaining about the new ways, or you're it and you're trying to figure out how to survive. And it doesn't mean that the younger coaches or generation aren't frustrated with some of these things, but we'll get to this later. But like even Kevin O'Connell's 39, like I'm 39. Like I consider myself to be young. I had no idea that guy was 39, and his perspective on certain things versus just somebody 14 years older in Mick Cronin is unbelievably different. And so we would have to sit down and probably study this a little bit more to kind of figure out, like, is there sort of this point of no return? But I think we are evolving. The environment is evolving faster than we are as a profession. And I think that's why it's important to have these conversations, because you have to be able to continue to raise that awareness. And then the other little point I would make here real quick is I've been reading this book on social intelligence by Daniel Goleman. He wrote Emotional Intelligence like 30 years ago, and then has written a few more in this social awareness area. And social awareness comes up a lot in this book, but beyond that, something called social facility comes up a lot. And so it's to be aware and recognize, like, hey, this is an issue. It's a completely different to have the character and the discipline to make the decisions on certain things. So social awareness is a skill to know, hey, this is right or this is wrong or whatever. It's a completely different skill to make a decision and heat the cheese, as it were, to actually go out and influence somebody. And I think that's where, in these conversations, like that's where some of this potentially evolves to, is not just us reflecting, having the awareness, but if we're going to get to the clarity and the alignment, we got to start actually making better decisions.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that those decisions, right? Our whole thing is about making the next best decision. In the moment, Mick Cronin may have thought he was making the next best decision because perhaps to him, public embarrassment is now the only thing that's going to get his guys to play hard. How long is that going to last? Right.
I'm interested to follow their season. I'll say this: like, I'm going to tune into UCLA basketball, not like I wasn't previously. And quick shout out to our guy Dusty May for making this happen.
Yeah, right. We don't get this without him doing that.
Yeah.
Now, here, I want to bring this up to you. So I want to bring this up to you as we close out here in the next couple of minutes. So they played that game against Michigan on January 7th. So at the time of recording, that was 8 days ago. All right. They lost that game 94-75, as you can see in the little score graphic that's on that clip on Instagram. Now, they played 3 days later at the University of Maryland, and they lost that game by 18. So they took 2 consecutive L's by 19 and 18 respectively. And then they just played on Monday at Rutgers, all right? And they lost that game by 7. So they are 13th in the Big Ten. I don't think they have won. I mean, January 4th, they lost to Nebraska by 8. Now they play on Friday against Iowa at UCLA, and then they have Wisconsin 4 days later at UCLA. Wisconsin's number 24 in the country. What's to say that they aren't losing 6 straight in conference? And he went out and kind of showed all of his cards at this post-game press conference and made his team look foolish.
Well, what's interesting to me is it's not going well for them now, right? But if you go, and anybody can Google this, it won't bore you with all of the details, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They started 10-1, 11-2. They had a win over Gonzaga, win over Arizona, win at Oregon, win at Washington, right? Like they started 10-1. Were we not committed in? Like, why did we start 10-1? Did the staff care for the first 10 games? Were our players invested and connected? Was everybody in? And then all of a sudden, like, Christmas hits, and we're just like, we're done playing basketball anymore, right? Like, what potentially changed over a break or coming into this new year where all of a sudden this rant, I'll say this rant would make a lot more sense if they were 1-13.
Sure.
But starting 9-1, 10-1, 11-2, and then having a little bit of a skid, like this is how we're going to react when things get tough, when we face a little bit of adversity. And again, and I'm not saying like bashing Mick Cronin per se. This is more of a general statement to coaching profession anyway. We say these things to get these jobs, that we're going to be tough and that we're going to battle adversity. And we know when it comes that you don't rise to the level of whatever, you fall to the level of your training, right? Like, so again, we're exposing and telling us the moment that things get tough and it starts to feel like it's spinning out of control. What we have to tell ourselves is we didn't really have control over the 11-1 start to begin with. How much credit do we give ourselves for starting 10-1 if we're not going to take the blame for being 1 out of the last 6? And there's a whole lot of I in the middle of that rant, right? And so how do you take it when, and we've been there, like you start to feel like the season's starting to fall off. The wheels are falling off. Like, how do you get it back? And I'm aptly wearing this new, defense doesn't win championships, connection wins championships. You're giving up 94 points, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what's going to solve that? More defensive slides, more closeouts, more shell drill, more this, more that. He's talking about guys are getting hit on screens and they're not communicating. So what we have is a trust issue, a connection issue. and it probably goes deeper beyond the scout as well, because that's what most coaches and what we would, I guess, sort of warn against is diving more into the scout and diving more into the nitty gritty of the practice plan is not going to fix these issues and keep you from getting beat 18 at Maryland the very next game.
Mm-hmm.
It's deeper than that. It's trust, it's connection. It's, I don't need to be here. You guys need to do what you're supposed to do. There is an obvious disparity and misalignment between the why of everybody being in that room. And everything changes from a 10-1 start to going, dropped 5 in a row, 4 in a row,
yeah,
5 out of the last 6. And to be a fly on the wall and what those film rooms and what those practice plans are, and to say, okay, staff, I just told you I don't trust you and I think you all suck, but let's sit down and figure out how we're going to dig ourselves out of this mess and try to save this season and potentially your jobs and mine. Like, what is ultimately going to be that fix? And I just don't believe that it's going to be on some magical sheet of paper that's titled practice plan number 62 of the season.